area. You see it in at Harvard, we try to mix people in all kinds of different ways. But tracking, we call it ethnic tracking, continues. Ethnic tracking is taken for granted at UC Berkeley. I taught at UC Berkeley for 10 years. So we try to do it, but it's very artificial. Unless there's a change of the mind and heart, it's difficult to associate intimately with people not of your own background. So you have to go beyond parochialism to be truly human, or to be fully human. This is, of course, highly idealistic. Some people may not be able to move beyond the family. And you have to be able to move beyond chauvinistic nationalism. Patriotism is fine. Chauvinistic nationalism is not. In American politics today, Tip O'Neill was a very important politician in Boston. He made the remark that all politics is local. That's true, the American political system. If you are not responsible to your constituency, you're not going to get elected, right? And each person is tied to a constituency, therefore each person has to be somehow parochial. You fight for Massachusetts right, you don't fight for the California right. You're part of the Massachusetts. So the highest level of American patriotism or sentimental attachment is national interest. You just cannot go beyond national interest. Mandela, very important statement. We were in a meeting, I asked him the question, it's in an international meeting, can Americans or American statesmen, not just politicians, move beyond national interest? Can the president say, our total commitment is not national interest, but world interest of the global community? No, this kiss of death for any American president. If you think the United Nations decision is more important than our national policy, you're in trouble. But in the Confucian idea, or even in traditional China, this whole notion about all under heaven. So all other states should be part of your concern. And of course, most difficult, but now we all understand it because we know we have to do it, is that we cannot afford to be totally anthropocentric. Ecological concerns force us or compel us to recognize the rights of animals. You don't slaughter animals just for the satisfaction of the human needs, and you certainly don't destroy forests, pollute rivers, and so forth. So this notion of the self as an expanded notion is closely linked to your question about community. So community is not only family, but your neighborhood, the nation, and the world and beyond. So one thing we need to see, and this again is very much against the individual-centered Western philosophical concerns, because the philosophical concern is the choice between self-realization and community service. It's a critical choice. Maybe too idealized. The Confucian point of view is fruitful interaction between the self and community. We have William James' very important statement. I may have mentioned this before. You must have walked into William James, right? Just this big building. And you probably ignore the motto in front, which is William James' favorite motto. The motto says, the individual impulse. Without the individual impulse, community stagnates. Without the sympathy of the community, individual impulse fades away. So there's an interaction, whether you like it or not, sometimes very open, sometimes unconscious. You need to be encouraged by a community to do your own thing. And a major Confucian thinker we were encountering Weiming in the 15th century. He said, I was all alone trying to pursue my sense of truth. And that loneliness was unbearable. And yet I found one friend, Zhang Ganquan, who is also a respected scholar. And he thought, he was thinking as I was thinking. I suddenly realized I have a friend. Just with one friend, my sense of truthfulness becomes greatly expanded. Because there's no private language, no private claim to truth. Even if one friend, the two of you, then gradually will build a fellowship. So the importance of the community. Normally, that's the question that most political philosophers are concerned with, the relationship between self and community, or the private and the public. That's why it's secular. There are two other dimensions very critical for the Confucian tradition. It's the harmonious or sustainable relationship between the human species as a whole and nature. We can say nature is earth. So how you establish that relationship? I want to use an expression, I don't think you're familiar with it, but eventually I think you'll find some merit in that statement. This is done by a major theologian, Thomas Berry. In the 20th century, we should regard nature not as a collection of objects, just collection of objects out there. We can try to understand it, we try to control it, to exploit it, sometimes even to abuse it, but because they are inanimate, if you say the cosmic order. We should try to regard nature as a communion of subjects. Communion of subjects. This is not only a relationship to a dog, a cat, but our relationship to plant, to even the piece of rock. Later, there's an argument for that. This is not just romantic assertion about forming one body with everything. There's a very strong argument. I think some of you personally would be able to appreciate it. The fourth dimension is the Confucian idea of heaven. This will raise all kinds of questions. What is heaven? Is it God? Is it Allah? Or it's impersonal? It's personal? All these questions. Sustain your sense of these questions. It is a transcendent dimension. It is moved beyond the human world, and yet it's interconnected to it. And what is the relationship you should establish with heaven? It's mutuality, mutual responsiveness between your heart and mind and the way of heaven. Now, I use the word heart and mind because the Chinese, certainly the Confucian term for xin, which is rendered as either heart or mind, and most people now believe you should render it as heart and mind, because it's both cognitive, that's our intellectual understanding, but also affective, which means it's emotion. It's both a feeling agent, you can feel, but at the same time you can reason. These two are not totally separate. So the heart and mind, our heart and mind need to have certain relationship. Hopefully a relationship is mutual, either mutuality or mutual responsiveness. This of course poses serious questions for theologians. How can we have a mutuality with God? God is all-encompassing, all-powerful, all-knowing. No matter how hard we try as a mere creature, we don't understand God's action. So there's no responsiveness. There's one way of not only respect, but faith in God, even though the world may turn out to be extremely unbearable. Where's God? But you should have faith, sometimes people faith. That's not Confucian position. Later I will talk about it. So these four dimensions are critical. And you say, well, this is very idiosyncratic. How can we understand these four dimensions in terms of our definition of humanism? And I would say humanism is not only selfish, not only nepotistic, parochial, nationalistic, it's not even anthropocentric. The most difficult is to go beyond the so-called anthropocentrism. Of course, there's argument against it. How can we think beyond our own position? To be subjective is unavoidable. So most of us, in fact, take it for granted that if you take yourself seriously, if you take individual dignity seriously, you have to have a position. That position may be unavoidably subjective, but it's important. Now, in the